The rain was relentless, hammering the glass walls of Cliff House like it wanted to drown San Francisco itself. Inside, the chandeliers glittered, casting gold across white tablecloths, but the warmth never reached me. I sat at the edge of the long table, my black dress sticking to my skin, the pearl earrings Mom gave me when I was 12 pinching my lobes. My family, parents, sister Lila, and a scattering of cousins I barely knew, surrounded me, their laughter sharp, their wine glasses catching the light like knives. This was supposed to be my night, my high school graduation dinner, a rare moment where I, Clara Voss, might finally be seen. But the air felt wrong, heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. I was 17, the kid who'd spent her childhood stitching up stuffed animals while Lila racked up debate trophies and law school offers. My hands, always steady, clutched a cheap medical journal under the table, its pages worn from nights spent reading under the dim glow of my pickup truck's dashboard light. I'd earned a full-ride scholarship to UCLA's pre-med program, a secret I'd kept tighter than a tourniquet. I mailed the application myself, standing in the cold outside a post office, while Lila blasted pop music in her convertible. No one knew. Not yet. But tonight, I thought, hoped, they'd finally see me. The waiter set a dessert plate in front of me, a chocolate tart with a perfect gloss, the kind of thing you'd see on a magazine cover. I didn't touch it. My father, Edward Voss, cleared his throat, his silver cufflinks glinting as he leaned forward. "Clara," he said, his voice low, deliberate, like he was reading a verdict. Everyone turned. Lila's smirk was sharper than ever, her diamond bracelet sparkling like it was mocking me. Mom's lips were a tight line, her eyes fixed on her wine glass. "We've been talking," he continued, "and we've decided you're on your own." The words hit like a scalpel, clean and deep. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch, not yet. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady though my pulse thundered in my ears. Lila leaned back, crossing her arms, her perfectly manicured nails tapping her elbow. "You're the family disappointment, Clara. Always have been, chasing this doctor nonsense when you could have had a real future with Dad's firm." Her voice dripped with the same venom she'd used when she found my UCLA acceptance letter, waving it like it was junk mail. "Pre-med? Seriously? You're throwing away everything for scrubs and blood?" I looked at Mom, waiting for her to say something. Anything. She didn't. Her silence was worse than Dad's words, a confirmation that I was nothing to her. The cousins shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting away. No one spoke up. No one toasted my scholarship, my 4 GPA, my years of late-night studying in the library while they celebrated Lila's law school acceptance. The tart sat untouched, its gloss mocking my unraveling world. Dad slid an envelope across the table. "A little something to start over," he said, his tone flat like he was paying off a stranger. I opened it. $250 in crisp bills, no note, no card, just cash, like I was a charity case. Then they stood, all of them, in a synchronized exit that felt rehearsed. Lila's heels clicked first, then Dad's polished shoes, then Mom's quiet shuffle. The cousins followed, heads down, as if I were already a ghost. No hugs, no goodbyes. Just the clink of glasses and the distant hum of the restaurant as they left me alone with a dessert I couldn't taste. Sat there, hands flat on the table, staring at the fork I hadn't touched. The waiter hesitated by my side, his voice soft. "Miss, are you done?" I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Outside, the rain stung my face as I stepped into the night, my heels slipping on the wet pavement. San Francisco's fog curled around me, cold and unforgiving. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked clutching my purse, where a worn medical journal and a cheap stethoscope charm, a dollar store trinket, reminded me I'd chosen myself. The city was alive, but I felt invisible. Neon signs flickered above dive bars and late-night diners, their glow barely cutting through the fog. My pickup truck, a rusted Chevy with a cracked windshield, was parked near the pier. I climbed into the back seat, curling up beside 2 duffel bags stuffed with everything I owned: clothes, textbooks, a toothbrush. I pulled a hoodie over my head, the fabric smelling faintly of coffee and antiseptic from my volunteer shifts at a free clinic. That night, my truck became my home. Mornings were a ritual of survival. I'd wake before dawn, before campus security could spot me, and sneak into the university gym. My student ID still worked, thank God. I'd shower fast, the hot water stinging my skin, and brush my hair in front of a foggy mirror, trying to look like I hadn't slept in a truck. Then I'd change in a stall, stuff my clothes into a backpack, and walk into my first lecture like nothing was wrong. Every day was a high-wire act. Smile too much and someone might ask questions. Look too tired and they'd see the cracks. So I kept my head down, aced every quiz, every lab, every exam. My name stayed at the top of every list, a silent rebellion against the family who'd written me off. But the cracks were there. One afternoon, after a grueling anatomy lab, Professor Langston lingered as I packed up. Her eyes, sharp but kind, seemed to see past my neat notes and perfect attendance. "You've got a rare kind of focus, Clara," she said, her voice low, like she was sharing a secret, "a stillness, even when the world's burning around you." I nodded, too stunned to respond. Was it praise? A warning? I didn't know, but her words stuck, a lifeline I didn't realize I needed. That night, I parked behind the medical library, where the lot was quiet and the building's lights cast soft shadows across my dashboard. My legs ached from hours on my feet, my chest hollow from the weight of it all. I leaned back, my eyes burning, not from exhaustion but from the tears I'd been holding back for weeks. Under the passenger seat, I pulled out a faded photo, tucked inside a dog-eared biology textbook, me and Grandma Marie, taken when I was 8 at a fire station open house. She'd been an EMT for decades, her hands rough but gentle as she showed me how to wrap a bandage. "Your hands will save lives, Clara," she'd said, her voice warm with certainty. "Don't let anyone tell you different." She'd died before I graduated high school, before I could show her my white coat, before I was called a disgrace at a dinner table. But that photo was my truth, my anchor. I let myself cry then, quiet tears soaking into my hoodie. Not loud, not dramatic, just a release of everything I'd lost. The warmth of a family who should have loved me, the safety of a bed I didn't have to hide in, the girl I used to be, who thought hard work would be enough. Weeks later, survival got harder. One night, as I slept in my truck, a shadow loomed outside my window. A man, his face half hidden by a hood, yanked at the door handle. My heart slammed against my ribs as I scrambled for the lock, my fingers slipping on the cold metal. He banged on the glass, his voice a low growl. "Open it, or I'll break it." I grabbed a tire iron from under the seat, my hands shaking but steady enough to hold it high. He backed off, disappearing into the fog, but I didn't sleep that night. My pulse raced until dawn, the tire iron still clutched in my lap. Another evening, during a volunteer shift at the free clinic, a patient high on something volatile lunged at me. His eyes were wild, his fists swinging as he screamed about voices in his head. I ducked just in time, my back slamming against a supply cart, needles and gauze spilling across the floor. A security guard tackled him, but the adrenaline stayed with me, a reminder that safety was a luxury I couldn't afford. Then came the storm. A freak squall hit the city, and the hospital's old wing took the worst of it. I was on a night shift when the ceiling above the ER groaned, then cracked. Plaster and dust rained down, patients screaming as nurses scrambled. I grabbed a gurney, pushing an elderly woman to safety as debris fell inches from my head. The air was thick with dust, my lungs burning, but I kept moving, one patient, then another, until the ward was clear. A week later, I was in an ambulance, racing to a multi-car pileup on the 101. The driver took a turn too fast and the rig skidded, slamming into a guardrail. Metal screeched, glass shattered, and my shoulder hit the door hard enough to bruise. I crawled out, my vision swimming, but I grabbed the trauma kit and ran to the wreck, stabilizing a bleeding driver before help arrived. My ribs ached for days, but I didn't stop. The closest call came during a chaotic ER shift. A nurse, overwhelmed, handed me a syringe of epinephrine during a code blue. I didn't check the dose. My mistake. As I pushed it into the IV line, I realized it was double the safe amount. My heart stopped as the patient's monitor spiked, then steadied. I adjusted the drip, my hands trembling but precise, and we saved him. No one noticed the near miss, but I carried it like a scar, a reminder to never let my guard down. By spring, things shifted. I'd submitted an essay for a small scholarship, half forgotten in a haze of exhaustion. One Monday, the financial aid office called me in. A former professor, Langston I suspected, had nominated me for a grant. It was enough for campus housing. My hands shook as I signed the paperwork, trading my truck's back seat for a single dorm room in West Hall. It was small, a creaky bed, a flickering lamp. But it was mine. No more fogged windows, no more waking to frost on my windshield. I didn't tell anyone. I just kept walking the same halls, wearing the same worn sneakers, keeping my head down. But the hospital was where I came alive. My first surgical rotation was under Dr. Kessler, a man whose voice cut like his scalpel. My heart pounded as I held a retractor, sweat soaking my scrubs. The patient's chest was open, a maze of muscle and blood, and I was steady. When it was over, Kessler glanced at me, his eyes narrowing. "Hands like yours don't shake, Voss. I'd trust them with my life." He said it like it was a fact, not a compliment. I didn't smile. I just nodded, but inside, something cracked open, a sliver of belief that maybe I wasn't the failure they'd called me. The hospital's glass doors became my gateway. My badge read Dr. C.M. Voss, the M for Marie, my grandmother's name, the only family tie I still claimed. In the reflection, I saw a woman with tired eyes and a tight ponytail, creases forming between her brows. I was a resident, a doctor, but the weight of my past clung to me like damp scrubs. Rounds started at 5:30. My voice hoarse from briefings, my body moving on autopilot. No one asked about my life outside these walls, and I preferred it that way. Then, one morning, I saw her name. Lila Voss, new hire, administrative clerk. My fingers froze on the file. Her photos showed the same sharp jaw, now softened by time, her hair in a messy bun. She'd aged, but not like me. Her stress was loud, careless, like chipped nail polish. I closed the file, my pulse steady but my mind racing. Lila was here, in my hospital, under my roof, and she didn't even know. During a staff briefing, she walked in, her eyes scanning the room without landing on me. "Hi," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "I'm Lila Voss, moving from corporate admin to something steadier." A nervous laugh, no ring on her finger now. She sat 2 rows ahead, her chipped heart necklace, a relic from our childhood, catching the light. We'd once shared a bunk bed, whispering secrets in the dark. Now she was a stranger, applying to work in my world. I didn't flinch when I overheard her later, whispering to another clerk. "Some of these doctors think they're gods, cold, entitled, like being distant makes them better." She was talking about me, Dr. Voss, without knowing it. I kept writing my notes, my pen steady, my face blank. But the sting was old, familiar, a wound that never fully closed. That evening, in the staff locker room, I saw her kneeling by a bottom locker, holding a creased photo. It was us. Me, Lila, and our little brother Nate, smiling in front of a tire swing. I'd drawn it when I was 6, taping it to my wall until Mom tore it down, saying it cluttered the house. Lila turned it over, her fingers tracing the edges, then looked up. Our eyes met through the narrow gap in the doorframe. My breath caught, but hers faltered, puzzled, not quite recognizing me. She folded the photo, tucked it into her pocket, and walked away. I didn't follow. I had a shift to prep for, a life to hold together. But the past wasn't done with me. The next morning, my pager screamed code blue ICU. I ran, my shoes squeaking on the linoleum, my heart pounding not from the sprint, but from the name on the chart. Edward Voss. My father. His chest heaved under compressions, his face gray. A crash cart trailing behind like a vulture. I froze for a split second, my hands hovering, the roar of 1,000 unsaid things drowning out the chaos. He was dying, and I was the only one who could save him. I scrubbed in, my hands shaking under the scalding water. The OR was a blaze of light, antiseptic sharp in my nose. The anesthesiologist glanced at me. "You're leading, Dr. Voss." I nodded, my voice clear. "I'm chief on this." From the observation bay, a clipboard clattered. Lila's, I knew. I didn't look up. I took the scalpel, my hands steady now, and made the first cut. The room moved with me, clamp, suction, suture, a rhythm I knew better than my own heartbeat. I wasn't saving my father. I was saving a patient, and in that moment I was untouchable. The surgery stretched into hours, his heart a fragile map of damage. An arterial tear, hemorrhaging, a ticking clock. I didn't think about the nights he'd screamed I was a burden, or the way he'd thrown my UCLA letter in the trash. I thought about anatomy, precision, the life under my hands. When we closed, the scrub nurse touched my arm. "Clean work, Chief." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. In the hallway, Lila waited, her arms crossed, her face a mess of guilt and disbelief. "You cut him open," she said, her voice flat. "You saved him." I met her eyes, the same ones that used to mock me. "I did my job," I said. "That's all." She opened her mouth, but nothing came. She turned and walked away, leaving me with the weight of a truth she couldn't face. I leaned against the wall, my reflection in the glass steady, composed. But inside the storm raged. I'd saved the man who broke me, the one who'd said I'd never be enough, and somewhere deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. The past was crawling forward, and I wasn't ready for what came next. The fluorescent lights in the ICU hallway buzzed like a trapped wasp, their cold glow casting shadows that seemed to cling to my scrubs. I stood outside my father's room, Edward Voss, the man I'd just pulled back from the edge of death, his chart heavy in my hands. My badge, Dr. C.M. Voss, felt like a lie pinned to my chest, the M for my grandmother Marie, the only family name I still claim. San Francisco's fog pressed against the hospital windows, a gray curtain sealing me in with the ghosts of my past. I'd saved him, but the weight of that act wasn't relief. It was a storm, churning with questions I wasn't ready to answer. I pushed through the door, the heart monitor's steady beat filling the silence. Edward's eyes fluttered open, his face pale, his once commanding presence reduced to tubes and bandages. He saw me, and for a moment recognition flickered, then hardened into something I couldn't read. Shame, maybe? Or defiance? "You," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "You're not a doctor." I set the chart down, my movements deliberate, my voice even. "That's what you always said, isn't it? That I'd never make it." His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. I stepped closer, the badge catching the light. "Hello, Edward. I'm your surgeon." The monitor blipped, his heart rate spiking. He tried to sit up, failed, and sank back, his breath uneven. "You came all this way for this?" he asked, like I'd orchestrated his heart attack just to prove a point. I pulled a chair to his bedside but didn't sit. "No," I said, my tone cold but not cruel. "I came because a patient needed me. The fact that it's you, that's just fate's twisted sense of humor." His eyes searched mine, looking for the girl he'd thrown out at 17, the one he'd called a disgrace at Cliff House. I wasn't her anymore. I was Dr. Clara Voss, chief surgical resident, the woman who'd stitched his heart back together while mine still bore the scars he'd left. "Clara," he started, his voice softer now. "You were overwhelmed back then. Your mother's cancer, the business, everything. You were so intense." I tilted my head, studying him. The IV drip, the bandages, the way age had carved lines into his face. His excuses hadn't changed, but they sounded hollow now, like a script he'd rehearsed too long. "Overwhelmed?" I repeated, letting the word hang. "I got into UCLA, Edward. Full ride, pre-med, the same week you told me to pack my bags. Remember that?" His mouth moved, but no sound came. I leaned forward, just enough to make him feel the weight of my words. "You threw my acceptance letter in the trash. Thought it was junk. You didn't even look." His eyes closed, maybe from pain, maybe from guilt. "I didn't know," he murmured. I straightened. "You didn't want to know." Soft knock broke the tension. The door creaked open, and Lila stepped in, her ponytail as perfect as ever, her hospital clerk badge gleaming. "Hey," she said, breezing past me like I was just another doctor. "Just checking on Dad." Her eyes flicked to me, then away. No recognition, just a nervous energy that filled the room. Edward's voice cut through, hoarse but sharp. "Did you know about her medical school?" Lila froze, then laughed, a brittle sound. "What? No, she never told us." I didn't turn to her. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "I texted you that night. You replied, 'Get over it.' Want me to pull up the message?" Her face drained of color, her lips parting as if to argue, but nothing came. She looked at Edward, then back at me, her eyes darting like she was trapped. "I don't remember that," she stammered. I nodded once, letting the silence speak. Edward looked between us, his brow furrowing like he was seeing the cracks in his family for the first time. "You both made your choices," I said, my voice calm but cutting. "You buried me because it was easier than believing I could be something." I turned to the counter, gathering my coat, the air thick with everything unsaid. Edward's hand lifted weakly, his voice barely a whisper. "Wait, Clara. Don't go. Stay." I paused, my fingers tightening on the collar. "I stayed 9 years ago," I said, not looking back. "I waited for you to call, for Mom to open the door, for someone to care I had nowhere to go. You didn't." He didn't argue, didn't beg. Maybe he knew forgiveness wasn't mine to give. I walked out, my steps steady, the door clicking shut behind me. The hallway felt like a battlefield, the air stale, the weight of their rejection heavier than ever. But I kept moving, one foot in front of the other, toward the elevator. The chime of the elevator doors felt like a release, but it didn't last. As I stepped inside, my phone buzzed. A text from Dr. Kessler, my attending. OR3 stat, code blue. My heart kicked into gear, not from fear, but from instinct. I sprinted back to the ICU, my shoes squeaking on the tile, nurses parting as I passed. The chart outside OR3 stopped me cold. Edward Voss again. His heart had flatlined, a complication from the surgery I'd just led. I scrubbed in, my hands trembling under the scalding water, the antiseptic burning my nose. The OR was chaos. Monitors screaming, nurses shouting, the crash cart rattling like a death knell. I took my place, scalpel in hand, my mind locking into focus. "Vitals?" I barked. "Unstable," the anesthesiologist replied. "We're losing him." I didn't think about the man who'd called me a failure. I thought about anatomy, precision, the rhythm of survival. The flat line stretched, a single note that mocked my every move. "Charge to 200, I ordered, my voice unshaken. The paddles fired, once, twice, nothing. "Again," I said, pressing deeper, my hand steady despite the storm inside. The third shock jolted his body, then a flutter, then a beat. I didn't sigh with relief. I kept going, suture by suture, until the monitors stabilized. "Close up," I said, peeling off my gloves. "I'm done." In the hallway, I stripped off my gown, the weight of the surgery settling into my bones. Nurses glanced at me, their eyes holding something new, less doubt, more respect. I didn't linger. I walked to the administration office where the discharge nurse handed me 2 forms. "Dr. Voss," she said, her voice hesitant. "You're listed as next of kin." I signed without looking up, the pen heavy in my hand. The file noted a medical power of attorney, signed 8 years ago when Edward still thought I was a dropout chasing a fantasy. The nurse's brows knitted, but she didn't ask. I tucked the forms into an envelope and stood, my shoes clicking softly as I headed back to his room. Inside, Mom sat by his bed, her lips tight, her eyes avoiding mine. Lila stood in the corner, arms crossed, her face a mix of guilt and defiance. Our brother Nate hovered near the door, his usual smirk gone, replaced by uncertainty. "You're really going to act like this makes you better than us?" Mom said, her voice sharp, cutting through the beeping monitors. I met her gaze unflinching. "I'm not pretending anything." Lila stepped forward, clutching the chart I'd signed. "You think showing up now after all these years makes you a hero?" Her voice trembled, but her eyes were hard. I smiled, small and measured. "I'm not here to be anything to you." Nate finally spoke, his voice low. "Then why'd you come at all? To rub it in our faces?" I turned to him, my brother who'd once snuck me snacks when Mom locked me out of the kitchen. "No," I said. "I came to close a wound." Lila's eyes flickered, and she took a half step back. "He did love you, you know," she said, almost a whisper. "In his way." I turned toward the elevator, my coat slung over my shoulder, "and I loved him," I said. "In mine." I didn't explain the difference. They didn't deserve it. The elevator doors slid shut, and I unpinned my badge, the plastic heavy with the weight of my name. "Dr. C.M. Voss," I whispered to the empty air. They called me a failure. I chose to become who I needed without them. The elevator descended, floor by floor, past memories, past wounds, past apologies that never came. I stepped into the parking lot, the San Francisco dusk casting a cool gold over my truck. I slid into the driver's seat, shutting out the world, and pulled a faded photo from my wallet. Me and Edward, fishing by Lake Tahoe when I was 9, his arm around me, his laugh real, like he believed I could do anything. That was before he said I'd never make it, before I ate cold cereal in my truck with my UCLA letter tucked under my thigh. A knock on the window startled me. Nurse Alina, her eyes kind but cautious, held a manila folder. "Dr. Voss," she said through the glass, "I thought you should see this." I rolled the window down, taking the folder. Pharmacy records, Edward's heart meds, paid in full for 5 years. The billing name, C. Marin. My alias from residency when I moonlighted at a free clinic to dodge hospital billing systems. I'd called in prescriptions anonymously, paid cash, used a fake address in Oakland. I'd gone without meals, without heat, to keep him alive. Elena watched me, her expression soft. "I looked it up. That alias traces back to you." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you." She gave a small smile and walked away. I sat there, the folder open across my lap, my breath steady but deep. I'd done it because, despite everything, I remembered the man who taught me to tie a fishing knot, who sang off-key while flipping pancakes. I didn't need his gratitude. I needed to know he'd keep breathing, and he had, for 5 years, on pills I'd paid for while I barely had enough for myself. Back in the hospital, the air felt different, charged. Lila stood outside Edward's room, her jaw tight, a printed bill in her hand. She didn't look at me as I approached, just pushed the door open and marched inside. "Dad," she said, her voice flat but trembling, "you need to see this." Edward looked up, color creeping back into his cheeks. She dropped the paper on his blanket. "Recognize that name? See?" His eyes widened, scanning the bill. "What?" Lila didn't wait. "That's Clara. She's been paying for your meds for 5 years. No calls, no visits, just keeping you alive." He turned to me, his face a mask of shock. "Is that true?" I didn't answer. He stared at the bill, like it held the key to who I'd become. "Why?" he whispered. Lila answered before I could, her voice breaking. "Because you broke her." Edward flinched, and for the first time, Lila's tone wasn't smug. It was hollow, raw. "You don't get to pretend it didn't happen," she said, quieter now. "You called her a mistake. You let Mom throw her out like garbage." Edward's voice was barely audible. "He was never garbage." Lila stepped back, and I met his eyes. "You don't need to say anything," I said, turning to leave. "I'm done." The sunset bled orange across the city as I drove home, my apartment a small studio I'd earned through years of scraping by. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked to the bathroom, letting the faucet run, the water cold against my fingers. My reflection stared back. Tired eyes, a scar just below my collarbone from the ambulance crash that nearly killed me. I'd walked away with broken ribs and a hospital bill I couldn't pay, but I'd stitched myself back together, alone. I ran my fingers along the scar and whispered, "One last cut." Not for them, for me. My phone buzzed. Dr. Kessler, my mentor from UCLA. "You haven't filed the transfer papers for Johns Hopkins," he said, his voice gruff but warm. "What's keeping you here?" I glanced at my coat hanging on the hook, the badge still pinned to it. "One last surgery," I said softly. He paused. "Is it worth it?" I didn't answer. I hung up, slipped the coat over my shoulders and felt the scar disappear under the fabric. The hospital was quiet the next morning, the kind of stillness that feels like it's holding its breath. I walked to the scrub room, the hallway silent except for the soft squeak of my shoes. Eyes followed me, nurses, residents, techs, but no one spoke. The air was heavy with respect, uncertainty, and something else I couldn't name. I scrubbed in, the water hot, the antiseptic sharp. Over my shoulder, I heard the clink of instruments, the shuffle of shoe covers. "You trained for this," I whispered to myself. "You bled for this." The OR doors swung open, and there he was, Edward, prepped under blue drapes, his heart failing again. He looked smaller, fragile, not the man who'd loomed over me with judgment. I nodded to the anesthesiologist. "Vital stable?" "For now," she replied. The attending stepped aside and I took my place. Scalpel, suction, clamp. My mind didn't wander to the nights he'd screamed I was a burden, or the coat closet I'd slept in during residency when I couldn't afford rent. I focused on the rhythm, the precision, the life under my hands. Then it happened, a blip, a flat line. The monitors screamed, a single note stretching into silence. "Code blue," a nurse called. I didn't flinch. I pressed deeper, my hands steady. "Charge to 200, I ordered. The paddles fired, once, twice. Nothing. "Again," I said, my voice calm, unshaken. The third shock brought a flutter, then a beat. I kept going. suture by suture until he was stable. Close up, I said, peeling off my gloves, one finger at a time. I stepped out of the OR, leaving behind the man who'd broken me and the heart I'd saved. In the hallway, the nurses' glances held no doubt now, only recognition. I walked to the administration office, my steps steady, and sat across from the discharged nurse. She handed me the forms. "Dr. Voss, you're still next of kin." I signed, my hand steady, the weight of 8 years of their dismissal heavy in the ink. I stood, the envelope tucked under my arm, and walked back to Edward's room one last time. Mom was there, her eyes cold. Lila stood in the corner, her arms crossed, her face a storm of guilt and anger. Nate looked like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find the words. "You think this makes you better than us?" Mom spat, her voice low. I didn't blink. "I'm not here to be better. I'm here to do my job." Lila stepped forward, her voice shaking. "You think saving him makes you a saint?" I smiled, just enough to cut. "I'm no saint. I'm a surgeon." Nate's voice broke the tension. "Why'd you do it, Clara? After everything?" I looked at him. The brother who'd once been my ally. "Because I could." I turned to leave, but Lila's voice stopped me. "He loved you, in his way." I paused at the door, my hand on the frame. "And I loved him," I said, my voice steady, in mine. I walked out, the door clicking shut, the hospital fading behind me. The elevator ride was quiet, each floor a step further from the past. I unpinned my badge, the weight of Dr. C.M. Voss settling into my palm. I'd chosen to become who I was without them, and that was enough. In the parking lot, the city hummed, alive and indifferent. I slid into my truck, the photo of me and Edward still tucked in my wallet. I didn't look at it. I didn't need to. I'd carried it long enough. As I drove into the dusk, the scar under my collarbone ached, a reminder of the crash, the nights in my truck, the years I'd fought to stand here. I wasn't healing for them. I was healing for me, and somewhere, in the quiet spaces between heartbeats, I knew the real surgery wasn't in the OR. It was in letting go.